Welcome everyone for What's Up Doc number 11. We have a wonderful session and topic for you today. That topic today is the eternal or eternity. We hear eternity, we think forever, infinite or unending time. But as John and I were discussing what to talk about today, there's another applicable definition. A state to which time has no application, or timelessness. It has also been defined as endless life after death. But with regards to the context of a state in which time has no application, it's timeless. What does that mean? What is the eternal for us? Is that true reality, the eternal? Is truth beyond time? Is time a perspective that can be malleable, that can change? Is it something that we play with? Is it longitudinal? And if we take a quantum approach to things, everything is happening in a now moment. The eternal now. And I call it the eternal now. It means that there is no past. And there is no future. And all aspects of your consciousness, everything, irregardless of longitudinal time, is occurring now, eternally. So that is our topic today, and how that may come and guide us, how that may assist us, facilitate a perspective. We're going to go in at an intellectual start and wheel our way back down to the heart and intuition as we typically do. John, do you have for any introductions for the eternal?
Well, for me, it's the eternal is now, right? I mean, if we say now, and of course we never can be in the now, right? Because all of our physiological functions take some duration to unfold in a way that we can comprehend them. So if we're going to try to use our logic or reason, we can't get to now, right? So, because even the simplest thought takes milliseconds, and that's already the past. So reason, it seems to me, is always going to be in the past.
Yeah, it's a valid point.
Yeah, and then we project our memory of past events to the future, and that's what we call planning or predicting or anticipating. And our bodies do that automatically for us. Fortunately, they do. I mean, if we knew how many physiological processes were involved in just walking or playing basketball or some sport, I mean, oh man, the body's just going through incredible gyrations to try to handle all of these things, even though our thoughts might be on something completely different. Our thoughts, if I'm running out for a pass, then I'm running and my body's taking care of all this stuff. And it's taking care of myriad things every moment you're alive. And when you move, oh geez, there's just countless sensors all over your body in proprioception telling your sensory system where every part of your body is and coordinating all of this. It's just you can't imagine how elaborate our internal control system really is.
Yes.
But in spite of all of this, our conscious thoughts are always in the past. To me, they're always in the past because they take time to unfold. Our awareness, however, it seems to me we can be aware of now at some
Yes.
sort of mysterious level. But
Yep.
to me, the now is like zero, okay, because it's zero time. And then that doesn't make much sense to our mind because you have to have always a time interval, some tiny time interval. I mean, you can put zero in an equation for time. That doesn't mean anything. It's just a symbol. The reality is more than the symbols. In fact, everything science does for the most part is symbolic. And then we try to find applications for the symbols to actually change something physically. And it almost always works differently than the plan. The science is the plan, but I remember when I visited Houston, NASA Houston Space Center, they had this missile, the Saturn V, laying on its side, right? And you could go up to it and touch it and see, this huge rocket. And the guide said that, they couldn't build this rocket today. They built it in the 1960s, and we would have to start all over again. They say, why? You've got all the plans, you got all the details, oh yeah, you do have all the plans and all the details. But now most if not all of the people who actually put this thing together and got it to actually work, they're dead. They're not here anymore. And they had all kinds of tricks they learned that they had to adjust this and that by this amount and that amount. And they didn't all get written down. You couldn't write them all down. It was inside of these people. It was their experience.
The awareness.
And when they died, their awareness. Yeah. And when they saw something, they knew how to adjust it, and they weren't following the blueprints, because the blueprints was theoretically how it should work. But how did it really work? It was through the internal functioning of the people that were building it. So in other words, the people in a culture are the ones that carry the history of that culture, and they have a limited history. They're only around there for a limited time, and things are lost forever. Now, if we want to build a rocket to go to the moon, we wouldn't build a Saturn V anymore anyway. We would build a completely different rocket now, because we have a whole different basis. And that rocket, when it works, it's going to depend on the engineers and the technicians that are building it. And when one of those people leaves for a better job, there's going to be hell to pay for a while, until somebody figures out what that person knew that they didn't realize he knew. But something didn't work the way it was supposed to. And he's the only guy who's not here anymore. Must have been something he did. Call him up, right? Who knows? Anyway, this zero and infinity, to me, are the two absolute references we have for reality. And zero is now. Zero interval of time, zero instantaneous now awareness, this instant. Zero interval, that's now. And infinity is eternal, the eternal. But they're both now. All right, I mean.
Awareness is now.
And awareness is now, yeah. I mean, so in that sense, it's, we're somewhere between zero and infinity, but they're both unachievable for us.
So where would
And
now
in
be,
between,
where would now be between 0 and infinity?
it would be at 0.
Be at 0.
Yeah. But 0 is infinitely far away from from our ability to get to it now. We keep trying to get to 0. Okay, so we're now talking about what, attoseconds or
Yeah.
some tiny 10 to the minus 20 seconds or something like that. And we keep trying to get shorter and shorter and shorter, but there won't be any end to that. Not in my opinion, not from my perspective.
So we're
There
really,
won't be any end.
so is it safe to say that if we could really make a huge leap here, that just as the same token that you weren't born and you're not going to die, the essence, the eternal aspect of yourself, that in the same token, there is no true measurement.
True measurement. True with a capital T or little t?
You choose. So when we're looking at trying to go all the way back to 0, going back to 0 through measurements, and we're just going to dissect that out more and more, because that's the now. What does this mean, this eternal, with regards to our awareness? Can our awareness, can our science, can our spiritual aspects, can use awareness and consciousness interchangeably, although they're somewhat different, but circular in definition? Where does this assist us to find the big truth, big T? What is the big T with regards to going back to 0 and having infinity? Where is our truth, our essence? These are all questions to ask.
Well,
Yeah.
in our conversations, I mean, we're talking to each other and our minds are involved and reason is involved. And so time lapses are involved as our functions go on in our brain and in this physical domain. And we only deal with the eternal as an abstraction.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah, and so this abstraction is just a part of our awareness, which doesn't exist in time to me. Okay, our awareness exists in the eternal.
Perfect. So our awareness.
And so if you,
yeah,
if I want to experience, a lot of it depends on exactly what your intention is for interpreting this word meaning. And I think in many cases when people are looking for the meaning, they're looking for something that they can do about something else, right? What does this mean? What are the consequences of this or of that? And so action is involved. Well, as soon as we're at that level of functioning, we're in the physical time domain. All right, we're not in the 0 time domain. We're not in the eternal domain. And to experience eternity, you have to be there. So how do we get close to that eternal domain? We don't get close to that eternal domain by focusing our attention outward. By outward, I mean a conversation or doing or something like that. To me, we need to approach the eternal domain by going inward, right?
Yeah.
Inward, that where our awareness is inward. Our access point to our awareness as a physical entity is inward. And I think of it as this center point, this infinity point in the center of my sacred heart.
Okay.
That's where my connection to the eternal, or to the infinite, or to zero, this instantaneous zero, that's where my connection is. And since no time can elapse between that connection in my heart and any thought in my head, any mental consequences, or any kind of thought at all in my head, there can only be zero time between that and this zero instant of now, which means I can't think it. It doesn't belong in my mind. My mind is there to exercise control, okay, over whatever surrounds me, or whatever needs to be confronted as I function as an entity. But that's not where eternal is. Eternal is in this now, this eternal now, which is this zero point, right? That's where it is, and no time can elapse between that. So that means that we have this awareness that that point exists, and so how do we access it? Well, for me, the only way I can think of accessing it is contemplation, is to get quiet. It works best for me is if I don't move anything.
Wouldn't contemplation for some people mean thoughts and thinking?
Well, not for me.
Okay.
There's not thought there.
So contemplation here in this context is not referring to thoughts or spinning the wheels.
No.
Could we use the term presence?
Yeah, I think it's a presence.
Okay.
You're in the presence of something great.
Okay, so presence.
And in a sense, I think you can still know, in a sense. You don't know in a logical sense. You don't know like 2 and 2 is 4. It's not a memory knowing. It's a awareness knowing, right? There's another kind of knowing here. It's sometimes, for me, it's always a little tricky, because I know a lot of things that I have no rational basis for whatsoever. I mean, but they are the things that my life revolves around. And I don't have any reservations about not being able to explain it to anybody. This is this world inside of here that's centered on this zero point. All right. And there is a trust that has to exist there, that has to grow. And one of the best ways to test this trust is to go without, right? Well, for example, one of the things that helped me enormously to begin to understand how to approach this zero point was fasting.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, because food is pretty precious to us. We have a hard time existing for very long without food.
Some people.
Yeah.
Right.
And I've read about people. There's this woman in India who never ate. All right. So there is some evidence that it's not actually necessary for us to eat, that we can live on energy.
You have to have your body systems and your template and your DNA in appropriate conjunction and alignment with that. But when,
yeah, something I don't have any idea, and I don't know that any of these people who don't eat anymore have ever been dissected so that they know what's going on inside of their body. But
yeah, the people who reach that level will probably want to take their organs with them through the different post-life process. So if we get back to zero and at the infinity point and presence and awareness and knowing,
yeah,
and accessing this eternal, the eternal, and it where you're saying it's more presence. There's a little bit of definition on contemplation, and we can translate that to presence. Actually, it might make more sense to more people. And then within this awareness, there's a knowing, and it's not a knowing of the mind.
right.
One of the things that's interesting is you brought up that your reference points are typically 0 and infinity, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we interchangeably have used to access the eternal 0 point or the infinity point.
Mm-hmm.
So the reference points are actually eternity.
Well, the 0 point is infinitely far away from us. We cannot approach it by developing an instrument which is capable of measuring a shorter time interval. Okay.
Okay.
A millisecond, a nanosecond, a femtosecond, a nanosecond. Building an instrument that can access these things and make a readout that I can see with my eyes is not going to get us any closer to the 0 point. Right? We can't approach that step by step. All right. This is like trying to get to the wall by cutting the distance in half between me and the wall.
And
I can never get to the wall.
But this is where some would say they consider the spiritual, source, the field, where there's a gap between the ability to measure something. So let's just take science, the definition of science, and say you measure something.
Mm-hmm.
Well, science needs to move outside the ability to measure something. Everyone's trying to measure something. And that became the definition of science itself. But science should be more of a global, inclusive definition beyond measuring, because that is the material. That is the ability to measure something, a cause and effect, a prediction. But what we're talking about here is the core of how things are. Right, we talk about things going from sound to light to matter. Well, are you measuring that sound? Can you measure that light? Can you measure that subtle energy realm? Can you measure the eternal now? Can you measure infinity? Can you measure 0? You can attribute 0 as nothing to something, as a symbol, a starting point, maybe. So if we look at cutting something in half and never getting there, this is where the mystical meets the science.
At 0.
At 0.
You have to remember in science that measurements require instruments. No measurement happens without an instrument. No quantitative measurement happens without an instrument. Instruments require standards. The standards are all relative. Right, so right off of the bat, you can see that an absolute 0 that represents now is not going to be addressable with a relative reference point.
Yeah.
This is an absolute point. This is an absolute that has to do with reality, because this now, this 0 point now, exists in the entire universe now. The entire universe exists at the infinite existence. All is at the 0 point. This is why I'm saying 0 and infinity are just as far away from us. We can't get to them from here. Not materially. We can't get to them materially.
So how do we access the eternal? Well, let's put eternal in context of the deeper voice within, the divine guidance, the source, right?
There's a lot of names for it. I suspect it's all the same thing.
Same thing.
And each one of us will have a different name for it, depending on our history, on our perspective, on our own reference points that we use to get along in the world. Because in the world, we all need reference points. And if we're going to get along, it helps a lot to have the same reference points.
Yeah.
Although if you have different reference points, which we have a lot of cultural reference points that are different.
I think we covered that
over the world.
Yeah, we've covered the reference points in context in a previous episode, which I definitely highly encourage the audience to check out. Very fascinating to understand communication at many levels. With the eternal, we kind of put that into context. I'll do that real briefly. Timelessness.
You
And
say timelessness?
yeah, timelessness. Awareness doesn't change or exist in time. So awareness is within the eternal. You can access the external domain by going inward, an access point to awareness. Different points of 0 and infinity access points. Talked about the Sacred Heart. You can't access eternal with the mind. And we're talking about the now. Everything, the eternal is the now. Talk about presence and awareness and a deeper knowing beyond the mind. There's a certain point where these all come together for unity purposes and an integrative process for an individual. And when I think and I feel into eternity, there's a calm, silence, presence, and existence. Existence, consciousness, and bliss, Satchitananda. Some could even go as far as to label that as another definition of love. And we go in, it's this presence, this almost hum. It's a loving hum. Beyond the material world that we find ourselves in. Within it, yes, but beyond it as well. Some would say that we are all eternal. That we were neither created nor destroyed in the sense of birth and death. That our truth, our eternal truth, is not separate from this eternal that is all that is. Merely part of all that is experiencing temporality as a figment of illusion, as a figment of time. To experience the material, there must be change, as you've always said, John, right? And with change comes time.
That's how we characterize
It's how we, yeah, it's how we characterize change, or we could characterize change.
Mhm.
What makes the water behind us eternal? Those are just pictures, folks. Sure, I'd like to have a patio where this picture is taken. Why not? But it
Yeah.
might deface the monument. So there's peace in the eternal. There's truth in the eternal. There's the reminder that what we experience is an experience. And that's what it is. It's a learning experience. But just like what John's saying, what are you? You're eternal. So when we talk about different concepts of meditation, going beyond the thoughts, going beyond the mind, going beyond the ego, becoming whole again, comes to the access point of awareness to the eternal, and not being fixated on anything but that. And seeing processes such as you were suggesting, John, with the physiology, the neurophysiology, walking, everything takes time, milliseconds, fractions of a second. But still, that processing takes time. So then we go into the lack of separation here, and go as far to say that you are the eternal, experiencing temporal time. How can this be applied to our lives? By recognizing that you are the eternal. Not in the religious sense, not in what we've been taught as eternal life, although that's applicable. But as we know, on our experience, life begins and ends. From that perspective, you're born and you die.
Physically.
Physically. So true life is eternal. It's self-propagating. It doesn't have to feed off anything. It's self-sustaining. And so truth coming from this source is self-sustaining, eternal, and that is the core of everything. So I'm going to get off my soapbox and hand it over to John. If he's got anything to add there.
Well, I guess I think a lot about science and when I'm trying to be rational and measurements. And I think it took me a long time doing measurements before I realized that very often new discoveries are frustrated by inadequate instruments.
Okay.
You can make measurements, but the measurements no better than the instrument you use to do it with. The measurement isn't really yours. All right. When you put your finger on a button or you feel some bump on a smooth surface, those are real observations on your part, and you're really making them. All right. And your sensors are functioning there to tell you that that's there, that something is there. But when you have a cyclotron or a Van der Graaf generator, or something. There are a lot of complex instruments around. I mean, endless devices, electronic devices that you're using for measurement. You have a caliper and you're a machinist and you're going to make a measurement to a 10,000th of an inch. And you use this caliper or micrometer to do that with. And that measurement's no better than the accuracy of that micrometer, right? And a lot of times, instruments we use to make measurements aren't as accurate as we think they are. So this whole observation thing in science is a bit tricky, because the instruments that are involved are the things that are actually making a measurement of some kind, and we're producing a readout on those, so our eyes can determine that some readout has occurred, but a calibration has to occur on those. The calibration requires a standard, and the standards are all arbitrary.
But what is
So
someone?
it seems to me we have to be careful about giving science more credit than it's due. Okay, I mean, this is a really painstaking, hard process to be a scientist. I mean, and you know that as well as I do. You know how painstaking it is to do an experiment, a meticulous experiment, and trying to do it with cells and living organisms. I at least got to work with things that were dead. They weren't around all the time and creating offspring and all of this sort of thing. I mean, it's a painstaking job to make good measurements.
Well, they're trying to separate.
It's very hard to do.
Yeah, because the scientist is trying to is in the illusion of separation from the experiment, from the measurements, trying to exclude that aspect there, but we can't exclude the scientist or the person making the measurements from the measurement itself, because that's ridiculous.
Well, yeah, I mean, the intentions of the person making the measurement are very important in the quality of the measurement as well. And the intentions are something nobody knows except the person doing it. And sometimes even the person doing it doesn't know all their intentions.
No, but I would make the argument. Yeah, I would.
What I'm trying to.
Okay, yeah, I'll quit interrupting. My apologies, folks.
Well, it's that we credit science with a bigger influence on our everyday life than it deserves. All right, I mean, there are a lot of pitfalls in the things that science does, and a lot of things are ludicrous a century later, what we believed, and we're in a no different place now. If you go back into the late 1800s and look at the history of science, interpretations of what was going on at 130 years ago, you would laugh at the assertions that scientists were making at that time because they were ridiculous, absolutely ludicrous. 50 years later, they were idiotic comments that they were making and assertions positions they were taking on the future and what was happening and how much we knew now. And we're in the same place now. Nothing is different now. It's just that we're at a different stage. All of our uncertainties are new ones. All of our assumptions are new ones. And we credit it with more credibility. We give more credibility to this science thing than it deserves. And we shouldn't, I don't think society should be in service to science. It is a lot this way now. And war, of course, has accelerated all of this. You need to have the science so you get some advantage over your adversary, so you can put your adversary down, which is a primitive intention in the first place. To snuff life out isn't very helpful when you're trying to grow in your understanding of meaning.
Uh-huh.
So the science is distorting our understanding of the reality that we actually live in. We think about, last night I was watching a program on deep fakes. They can now take an artificial intelligence system. I can be imaged by that system. And over a period of about a half an hour, they can turn around and present what I'm presenting to you now, and you can't tell the difference. Every nuance in my voice, every mannerism that I have, every twitch of every eyelid, the wiggling of my hair, whatever, well, not that, but, right? But whatever it is, the asymmetry in my ears and my eyes are both at the same level. Everything's going to be perfect, and you won't be able to tell. All right. So science keeps advancing in these kinds of things and pushing the boundaries on, and it's thrashing our reality around. And this whole business of human awareness, this whole business of zero and infinity as reference points, the notion that there's a fundamental mystery in life itself, this concept of the eternal, the constant bickering that goes back and forth between science and religion, which is all just evading the reality that we live in. We live with massive uncertainty, and that's no more apparent than it is today in our world of diverse cultures. You look at the uncertainty that we have in the world now. I mean, just look a few years ago when cryptocurrency came in and people got to be millionaires overnight with cryptocurrency, and all of a sudden a lot of people are broke now, right? I mean, these boom and bust kinds of things are coming faster, they're coming harder. The people are the debris that's being produced from these crazy things that we keep implementing. I think that some of these mystical concepts have not changed in thousands of years, and there's reasons they have not changed in thousands of years, because they are fundamental. They're fundamental. This notion of now, this instant of now, is fundamental. And it's just as important now in this modern scientific age as it was 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago. It hasn't changed. You know, the realization that our mind deals mainly with knowledge and some understanding, and our heart deals with wisdom, and without wisdom, we will destroy ourselves. That's no different now than it was 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago. It's just the same thing keeps happening over and over again with each generation that forgets all of the patterns of the previous generation. And
Kind of
eternal is another one of those things.
okay.
Right? The eternal is another one of these things that gets kind of lost in the arguments and all of the noise that bombards us every day. If you think of a farmer 150, 200 years ago, was out in the field behind his horses, all right, plowing and contemplating all that time and plowing. And he's not thinking every minute about exactly where this thing is going. The horses pretty soon know what to do, right? And he has time to reflect and go inside. We're losing that.
You think that's
we're so peppered,
yeah,
with trivia, that we're losing this time that we need to reflect on the impossible, on the infinite, on the 0 point. I mean, these things that have everything to do with the reality we live in, and appreciating it. I mean,
well, I think it's essential. I think I would go as far as to say it's essential.
well, we have so much more potential than we're realizing when it comes to wisdom. How much wisdom do you see daily in our culture? I mean, what little I see comes from little encounters I have each day with people on the street, with politeness, with somebody who lets me in when I'm trying to get into traffic and everyone leaves 2 inches between the car in front, and I'm there for 5 or 10 minutes trying to get in, and somebody leaves a gap, and that's when I really appreciate that. I mean, and that's when I see something that matters. I mean, where 2 people made a connection, even though they don't know each other, and they never said a word to each other. They nodded to each other and waved, which is about as much as you do in your car. But that made my day, right? That's one of the most important things that happened to me in a day. Those things I get more and more rare. That's sad. That's sad. And we're just too enamored with all of these things around us.
It's forward thinking. We got to get things done. We got to be productive. We got to survive. We can't starve to death. We have to be able to provide for ourselves. We have to keep working, work. Chop, chop, chop.
Yeah.
And, you can only have a carrot in front of someone for so long until there's nothing left of the carrot to motivate the person.
Well, I think some of what's happening to us culturally now is because we've neglected these intangibles in life. The little things that make a person's life tolerable.
Yeah.
Those things, when they slide into the background, I mean, road rage and all kinds of things happen. 2 people get into an argument and somebody dies over a trivial argument that there wasn't any answer to anyway.
It's kind of like war, isn't it? It's a program.
Yeah.
So that's a program. That's conditioning.
But more thought about this eternity. And I think a lot of people have written off, it doesn't matter. It's not important. Well, it is important. And contemplation is important. More important than we begin to realize. And as a culture, when the mass of the culture no longer appreciates those things, its end is in sight. To me, these things are fundamental to our existence.
So contemplation is a deep reflective thought, a state of being thought about or planned, an action of looking thoughtfully at something. So thought and contemplation are very heavily correlated within the dictionaries for some people.
Well, thoughtfully is a very curious word because it sounds like it's a mental process, but I think something that's done thoughtfully is also a heart process.
Heart
Process,
so
as well as a mind process.
So again, we're putting it in context and reference points for the audience.
Yeah, the word thoughtfully sounds like, oh, well, you're thinking about it. Well, it's more than thinking. It's thinking about it in the context of your heart.
So intuitive.
It's a loving kind of thought. It's a thought that's of mutual value to the thinker and the one that's thought about, or the thing that's thought about. They're equal in this kind of, this is a loving thought. So we're complex machines. So these aren't separate processes, the heart and the mind. They work together.
Yeah, we talk heart-brain coherence is critical, and
Yeah.
To get the neurophysiology working right, you engage with the heart. It helps you with staying in presence and awareness.
Yeah.
Both you and I have dabbled in that.
Yes, we have.
Our brain coherence,
Yeah.
Boris. So you really got fired up there for a minute, John. I had to step
Well,
back. That was great.
Well, this is.
Sorry
this
for the
is something
interruptions
that-
earlier.
Well, this is one of the things I don't lose sleep over many things, but this is one of the things I do.
Well, you're seeing it
just
in your
hoping
everyday
there's-
life.
Well, I'm hoping there's more people in the world who are centered in this way than as a parent,
Yeah.
because it's not very visible. You
Well,
see it on a one-on-one, but you don't see it. You don't see it in a large community very often at all.
Well, let's just look at the system itself. Are they rewarding you to become in contact with the eternal? You know, the system's getting crunched. You keep the same formula until the snake starts eating its tail, and productivity goes down. We have the Great Resignation. We have institutions, financial, academic, corporate, keeping the same algorithm with a consciousness that no longer supports it. Eventually that will be replaced, devolved, and evolved. So we have to take responsibility to a certain extent of ourselves and the life that we lead. To have the courage to look at the world and be the change that you want to see within it. Now, that's not easy, is it? When we're trained to think we have to survive a certain way, we have to do this and do that. To a certain extent, you have to put food on the table, you have to shower, you have to have shelter. You have to have a car, cell phone. These are all these things designed to increase our productivity. For what? What is our definition of productivity? And what's really happening here?
Yeah.
You know, what's really happening here? I ask everyone to come up with their own definition. I'm not going to say what's happening here. Take a close look. It's going to be different for everyone. Everyone's got their own reality. I welcome you. Take a close look and see within yourself, see without yourself. Ask how your relationship, whether your relationship is healthy within and without yourself. Then ask yourself, do you have the courage to live the way and be the change that you want to see? It starts with letting someone pull in into a tight traffic jam. Compassion is a good start. And I believe there is room for divine alchemy within everything. That by seeing and knowing and experiencing, then the changes can come. Instead of the sleeping. The disease without a symptom is the most dangerous disease. I can also go as far to say that the measurement itself, whether how flawed it is in science, is still an indirect evidence or proof that eternity, in fact, does exist.
That would require more explanation, I think.
Well, if something's finite, you have to have something that's infinite. For something that is small, you have to have something that is large.
So you can't make a measurement with a yardstick that has no gradations on it when you're trying to determine the size of your fingernail.
Mhm. I'm saying that the fact you can measure something is proof that there's something immeasurable.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah. Because you can measure something means there's something you can't measure, and that's something, and that's proof. So the fact you can measure something is proof that there's something you can't measure. That's just a simple relationship. That's simple fundamental things there, logic. So if we were to take that, okay, well, we can measure something, then that means we can't measure something. What is it that we cannot measure? 94%, maybe up to 96% of what exists.
Yeah, dark energy and dark matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you have 4% of matter, like that percentage goes down every year or something, but that you can measure.
Yeah.
So that's all I meant by that. Yeah, that's all I meant. And we're open to scrutiny and questions by the audience, and we don't back a particular belief or perspective or opinion. We're just simply having a conversation. And I can assure you that tomorrow it would be a completely different conversation.
Yeah.
And so there is some time lag between the postage of the videos and observing them on the channel. So give us some ease and grace with that. Be nice, inquisitive, and challenge. Be careful with beliefs. Careful with fundamental thoughts. And ask yourself, what does eternal mean to you? How is it showing up in your life? There's so many loopholes, but in the same token, John, there's been some amazing discoveries, some amazing developments. We know that everything of good can be used for bad and vice versa. It's an issue of intent and wisdom. Some people without wisdom never have the intent to do wrong, but they do. I've been there. I thought I was doing great things. The intent was there, the wisdom was not. And coming from someone who's really made some amazing strides in measurement apparatus and the regenerative agricultural realm. It's funny coming from one of the more advanced scientists who had some of the most advanced measurement devices to point these things out to you. But rest assured, it's a legitimate resource. John, you are a great resource for this. Is there any advice you have for bridging that gap that we're talking about? We always have a gap somehow. We try to bridge.
Well, I think it's important to keep an awareness, an open mind about the mystical. There's lots of what we encounter every day that's mysterious.
Okay.
And appreciating that and valuing that as an essential part of creation, as important as the things that we see and touch and manipulate. All
You've
the
said that, but
things,
yeah.
and the things that we don't necessarily manipulate, but we do understand that there is a lot of mystery, both because our own individual personal knowledge is limited, and therefore undoubtedly there's a lot of things that are mysterious to each of us individually. But there's also a lot of things that are mysterious to all of us.
Yeah. So you mentioned that earlier about embracing the mystery
Yes.
instead of fearing it.
Yeah. Accessing infinity.
Access infinity. You've also mentioned respecting the mystical in a few, I think in another session that we've had, another What's Up Doc talk. And eternal, zero and infinity, they all come under that domain, do they not?
Yeah.
Mystery and mystical, these synonyms that we use. Is it a mystery though? Is eternal a mystery? Does it, if you feel into it, does it feel more like truth? And then you realize what you've been taught might be more of a mystery as to why it is the way it is, because it's different. So depending on your perspective, I could say, to me, I can say the eternal. By the way, audience, it doesn't matter what I think, of course, but we're having a conversation just for we're plugging gears, right? Turning gears. The eternal, mystery, mystical, spiritual, whatever. To me, that feels normal. That feels right. That feels whole. That gives me freedom. That tells me home than myself to come within. The separation, compartmentalization, the indifference, lack of connectivity, opinions, beliefs, infrastructure, us versus them, poverty, hatred, racism, selfishness, lack of empathy, addiction, sadness and fear. That's not real. When you embrace eternal. It's realness since we have it and we feel it. What if we were to buck the horse a little bit, poke and prod, and question the narrative? Bucking horse every once in a while. Look at the system and say, is this eternal? Is this reflecting and embracing the unknown? So if you don't embrace the unknown, you're not living. Half of the work we do is being comfortable in the unknown. And in order to do that, you have to be present. And in the eternal now moment, present within awareness. Presence. It's harder and harder to do. But you don't need to do much. 5 minutes. 1 minute. Compassion. I like the definition of compassion. Love in action. show compassion. So challenging times. And everyone watching this video, everyone who hasn't, irregardless, as a gift to give. Part of that is the eternal experiencing itself. Are you the eternal experiencing itself? Call to action, I guess, today. Oh, must be the energies here on the grid system coming through.
Well, there's a lot to think about and contemplate. And it's the separation. That's one of the things you often mention, that it's really a serious issue. I think we think of ourselves as individuals separate from everybody else, but we're really not. Our energy fields are all overlapping, and it's we're all so connected now in material ways. Just have the electricity shut off and you'll find out how independent you are.
It's true.
And that's a material way that we're connected. And materially, we're far more connected than we've ever been. And in a way, that makes us vulnerable to the collective. So we have a relationship with the collective as well as a relationship with the individuals who are part of the collective. And we have to be thinking more on the collective scale, which is hard.
It's a valid point.
It's hard for us to do that, I think, because it's almost like thinking about infinity, to think about what we need to do to produce a harmonious culture for all of us to live in.
Yeah.
At least most of us want to live in a harmonious culture. And as long as we think of ourselves as individuals, points, right, in this conglomeration or this community of ours, whatever size you want to make it, then we don't think about the consequences of what we do or say on the collective as a whole. And we need to be thinking about that, or we need to be conscious of it and aware of that's a fragile structure. It's a big, very large, fragile structure. And if you damage this structure by what you do or what you say, it will affect all of us. It will bring us all down.
You know what else it does?
And electricity is a perfect one, but there's a lot of other ones. What if they stop picking up your garbage? What if you don't get water out of the faucet anymore? What are you going to do? Most of us are no longer able to supply these things to ourselves. They're just massive die-off. Millions, hundreds of millions of people die off.
Well, don't see that thought, John. Jeez.
Well, I was just thinking while you were going through that litany of words on all of the negative things that we can
negative
imagine
Nancy
happening to us in the world, that at least in English, we have a lot more words for disastrous things than we have for great things, for good things, right? We're much more aware of the negative emotions than we are the positive emotions. And if you
Yeah,
ask people to list positive and negative emotions, they'll have just a few on the positive side and they'll have endless lists of the negative ones.
yeah,
So we're just born through evolution to emphasize the downside of these things. But I think it's
good point.
important to emphasize the upside, and
Thank you,
eternity
John.
is one of the upsides, right? And our collective, our global human collective is a very important awareness for me anyway,
Uh-huh.
every day, to appreciate that I want to do those things both materially and thought wise and emotion wise that are positive to strengthen that global human collective,
Yes.
and
Eh,
that we might become part of the global living collective.
Yes. We already are. And, Heart Brain Coherence with Roland McCready at Heart Math Institute, he always asks, what are you feeding the field?
Yeah.
Because it is a responsibility and an energetic responsibility, what you're feeding the collective.
Mhm.
There are no closed doors when it comes to energetics and what's being fed to the collective. We're all responsible for that.
Yeah.
Even if people don't quote unquote know, it's still known.
Yeah.
And it still affects you at an individual level and the collective. And that is an opportunity for change. That's an opportunity for healing and power and empowerment, connection, and more positive words than I came up with negative, hopefully. If we can muster it up.
It's hard to think of very many positive uh,
Uh,
elements compared to negative elements in any aspect of our life. So you're not alone finding it challenging
yeah,
to think up the positive ones.
maybe it's
The
for
positive ones are nice. The negative ones can kill you.
yeah.
Right?
People
The-
perk up, they'll listen to the negatives because they're more alarming.
Well, we're programmed that
Yeah,
way from evolution.
yeah, the
Uh,
evolutionary. Well, it's don't appreciate it if everything's okay. Just keep waiting for the shoe to drop.
Yeah.
Preventative measures.
Well, the unknown has always been assumed to be dangerous by any species that wants to survive.
Yes. And I think
Right?
that's a
I
valid
mean,
point.
and so logically, we have a lot more negative words to articulate
Yeah, that makes so
the
much
unknown
sense.
with, right? So, and a lot of times when we say and do negative things, it's because of our great uncertainty.
Ah,
We we're facing something that to us is unknown and we're afraid of it, and that great fear is what is driving us at that point. And we have a lot more words that will generate fear than we have words that will generate joy.
well,
And so we need to concentrate more on taking time for those harmonious things, those things that can ultimately bring joy to the whole collective.
is that your cast off? I'm going to give you the cast off today. I'm going to give the audience a positive cast off with regards to the eternal.
Well, concentrate on the positive.
Okay.
I mean, it's have to be careful with that. Just like any short sentence, there's so many exceptions. It's dangerous to make simplifications like that. But I just hope that we can find a way to balance the positive things as well.
Mm-hmm.
To recognize that we have problems, but that we need to approach them with a positive attitude.
Mm-hmm.
And our attitude is everything.
What is it you say about attitude? That it's an indicator of what you're feeding the field. And how
Yeah.
your relationship to the field.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of a precondition for interactions, and if you want them to be positive, if you want positive interactions to emerge and harmony to be the result,
Yeah.
then you want an attitude commensurate with that.
I'd make the last plug that eternal is inherently positive. That creation, source, the field, whatever you want to call this mystery, the great mystery, is a positive mystery.
No, I wouldn't argue with that.
And if we're more in alignment with the eternal, we'll be more positive.
Yep.
Okay.
Good place to end.
Awesome. Honor, John. Thank you so much. I love our time together. Thank you, audience. It's an honor to spend this time. And with that, we're going to do a send-off. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Cheerio.
Cheerio.